Under the cold lights of the business class cabin, a seemingly small action sparked harsh waves of silence. A flight attendant, with a forced smile and a disdainful look, refused to let a young black girl board her private flight. No explanation, no protest. The girl turned her back, slowly walking out of the light of the plane door, leaving behind an empty space filled with whispers. That old backpack was not just an object, but a symbol of dreams and hopes left behind. Stories untold. On her wrist, the handless watch silently reminded her that the time of justice was still frozen in the darkness of indifference. Who was that girl? What story did she carry? And what did those who stayed behind unintentionally lose with just that cold shake of the head? Have you ever witnessed a moment of silence so heavy that it suffocates the space around you? When silence becomes the loudest voice in the room, what do you do? Do you choose to stand by and watch, or speak up for those who cannot defend themselves? Join me in this story. A story about silence, about an old backpack, and about the changes that the right silence and the right Rolls-Royce can make in a world full of prejudice. A black Ford SUV slowed to a stop right next to the metal steps leading up to the private jet. The door opened, and out stepped a girl of about 15 or 16, her dark brown skin standing out in the afternoon sun. She wasn't wearing flashy designer clothes, no Louis Vuitton bag or Dior sunglasses. She was just wearing a navy blue crewneck sweater, slim khaki pants, and a worn gray canvas backpack, like a student just out of class. But from the way she walked, confident, straight-backed, and from the way she stood still while the driver opened the trunk, there was something about her that made people look twice, not because she stood out, but because she was quiet. Up the stairs, Carolyn, the airline's chief flight attendant, was scanning the passenger list on her iPad. When she looked up and saw Leah, her eyes paused for a moment, as if she had been mistakenly scanned. Her expression changed from professional to wary, then cold, as if someone had flipped a switch in her mind. She didn't move, just stared at the girl as if she didn't understand how that thing had entered the scene. "Excuse me." Carolyn took 2 steps down, still holding the iPad like an invisible shield. "Can I help you with something, young lady?" Leah, still standing a few feet away from the steps, looked neither surprised nor deterred. She opened her bag, took out her e-ticket and ID, and held them out clearly. "Leah Brooks, I'm here for Flight 712 to Aspen." Carolyn looked at the ticket, then back at the girl. The gap between paper and reality seemed to be forcing her brain to process 2 mismatched layers of information. There was a pause, as if deciding whether a name was enough to erase a skin color. And then a half-smile appeared. Not a friendly one, but the kind you'd save for an unfortunate mistake. "Sweetheart." Carolyn tilted her head, her voice lowering as if she were talking to a child who had gotten on the wrong bus. "This isn't a rideshare. Are you sure you're at the right terminal?" On the plane, a middle-aged man, in a silver-gray suit and Gucci sunglasses, glanced down. A true business-class passenger. He said nothing, just smiled slightly and went back to reading the financial news on his tablet. Next to him, an older woman with a pearl earring, Mrs. Dalton, smacked her lips and whispered to the person next to her. "These days, they really think money erases everything." Leah stood still, clutching her ticket, her gaze unwavering. A light breeze made her skirt flutter, and the eyes of the young pilot in the cockpit swept past. He watched the scene for less than 2 seconds, then immediately lowered his head and returned to the controls as if he had seen nothing. Carolyn didn't ask any more questions, nor did she offer to check her ticket. She just stood there, waiting for the girl to realize her mistake and quietly leave. Like an old operating system that believes that there are people who don't need to be there, even if they have all the paperwork. A ground crew member stepped closer, about to speak, but Carolyn cut him off with a sharp nod. The girl did not belong here, and every eye in the hold, on the steps, on the deck, all were waiting to see what would happen next. No voice spoke in defense. No invitation to check the facts, just silence. The oldest language of prejudice, working smoothly, quietly, ruthlessly. Carolyn stood tall, holding the iPad like an impenetrable shield. Without hesitation, she repeated her refusal like a carefully rehearsed mantra. "I'm sorry, but you cannot board this flight." Her voice was emotionless, like an iron door slamming shut in Leah's face. despite the clear confirmation ticket in her hand. Leah looked at her, her eyes neither pleading nor protesting. She just stood there, motionless for a few seconds, before gently taking her backpack back and slinging it over her shoulder. Carolyn never called her by name, never once used the words Leah. To her, she was just the girl, an invisible but discriminatory label, assigned to separate, to diminish. Next to her, Mrs. Dalton, still clasping her hands in front of her chest, smiled sarcastically as if she were witnessing a very familiar comedy. She whispered just enough for the person next to her to hear, as if to add fuel to the fire of prejudice. She probably wandered from the wrong gate. Happens all the time. There was no argument, no explanation from Leah. She turned and walked away, a silent figure, but it rang out like an alarm in the silent crowd. A seemingly simple act, but it carried the weight of a statement that could not be ignored. In the far corner, a young employee stood, his eyes flashing with barely concealed hesitation. He looked at Leah, then back at Carolyn as if seeking approval. But Carolyn's sharp, warning glance was like a cold needle, reminding, "You don't want to get involved." No one was allowed to break that invisible barrier. Leah walked, silent but unyielding, amid looks that were both indifferent and silently judgmental. The air around her seemed to thicken, the chill of injustice permeating the stifling air, but she kept walking, not to disappear, but to wait for something greater. Leah sat quietly on the edge of the airport, in the fading golden light of the setting sun. The suitcase beside her was an inseparable part of her, waiting silently in the vast, cold space of the airport. The wind blew, carrying scraps of paper and unspoken thoughts. But Leah, despite being rejected so harshly right in front of the private plane, did not let her tears fall. That silence was heavier than any crying. She took out her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed the number, her voice humble but firm. "Dad?" They said not today. Just 5 words, like a gentle alarm carrying both injustice and a secret pain that could not be spoken aloud. On the other end of the line, Jackson's silence seemed to stretch on forever, as if he was weighing the world of wrongs behind those words. Then finally he said, his voice deep and determined, "I'm on my way." No need for lengthy explanations, just a short sentence is enough to convey the message. No one will be left behind, no matter how many invisible barriers are waiting. That scene, like a small black bird being chased away from a flock of pure white doves, resonates as a profound metaphor for the prejudices Leah is facing. But few people look closely at the color of those wings, which contain silent strength and pride. In that moment, the airport is not just a place to welcome guests or say goodbye, but becomes the stage of a silent war, just beginning, that no one dares to look directly at. Early in the morning, the private airport space seemed to be covered in a quiet coat mixed with a bit of illusion from the light fog that surrounded it. On the road leading to the parking area, a matte black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided smoothly, the morning light reflecting every sleek line of the luxury car, like a symbol of power and silent pride. The gentle sound of the engine gradually stopped. The car seemed like a noble creature stopped at the threshold, opened a stylized door, and from inside stepped out a man with a calm but authoritative appearance. Jackson Brooks, a black man in a neat light gray suit, every stitch carefully taken care of, exuded the demeanor of a chairman of a multi-billion-dollar technology corporation. His steps were not loud, not hurried, but carried undeniable determination. Each step was like placing a period, a tacit affirmation of his position and power. Unlike the shouting or the heated complaints, he did not come to cause chaos or anger. The atmosphere around him changed as he approached the reception desk, where the staff and passengers seemed to suddenly become unusually quiet, as if waiting for something important to happen. Jackson's voice rose, warm and sharp, just enough for everyone to stop and listen. "Good morning. I believe my daughter was turned away yesterday." The question was simple but carried the weight of a challenge. No need to shout, no need for force, just the presence of a father, of a person with power known to the whole world. In that moment, the invisible wall of prejudice and injustice began to crack, like a cold wind blowing from the north, shaking each brick that had seemed so hard for so long. All the previous resistance, the harsh words and contemptuous looks seemed to lose their power, giving way to a new breath of air, not fear, but awakening. It was Jackson's calm and authoritative voice that created a wordless echo, a hidden warning that things would never be the same again. No one dared to interrupt him, nor could anyone avoid that determined gaze. A silent collapse of the old power began here, when this man entered the game, placing on the negotiating table an undeniable truth. Justice, respect, and human dignity must be protected, regardless of skin color or social status. And it was the presence of Jackson Brooks that sowed the seeds of a small revolution. A wordless test for those who had looked down on and underestimated Leah, the girl who was pushed away because of invisible prejudice. Without shouting or harsh accusations, with just a gentle question, Jackson created a weight that made the whole room quiet, listen, and reflect. All the walls of injustice began to crumble, and in just a moment, the old power gradually lost its footing as the real power, the power of justice, rose from the darkness of silence. There was silence as Carolyn stepped out, her face wearing a forced smile, trying to hide her embarrassment and loss of initiative. "There must have been a mix-up," she said, her voice soft as if trying to diffuse an explosive situation, but unable to hide the deep confusion inside. Her words fell like shards of glass, reflecting the undeniable truth that was approaching. There were no more suspicious glances, snickers, or cold indifference like before, but attention was focused on every move of the escalating tension. Jackson stepped forward, his steps firm, without hesitation. His hand was extended, not to shake hands in an empty ritual, but to hand Carolyn a thick file, a carefully prepared complaint, documenting the injustice and discrimination Leah had suffered. Each page was a silent declaration of war, exposing the dark corners they wanted to hide, asserting rights and respect that could not be taken for granted. Not long after, the airport manager appeared, looking confused and solemn, his eyes inevitably showing tension as he faced the truth that was being revealed. He bowed his head and apologized, an apology not only for Carolyn, but also for the entire system that had allowed the incident to happen. And the decision was announced on the spot, like a wake-up call in the quiet space. Carolyn was permanently suspended from flying, a fitting punishment for her unfair and inhumane actions. Meanwhile, Leah was allowed to board the plane with her father, her steps gentle but firm, as a testament to the justice being restored. As the plane door began to close, Leah did not turn away immediately but stopped, her eyes sad but resilient, looking back. Her words rang out softly but deeply, as a reminder to all who witnessed, "People never forget how you made them feel." These words were not only addressed to those who had looked down on her, underestimated her, but also a warning engraved in everyone's mind. Actions, no matter how small or large, can create indelible wounds or profound healing. The confrontation is not only the end of an injustice, but also the opening of a new chapter, where justice and respect are put first. And anyone who has been on the sidelines will be seen with new eyes, full of compassion and fairness. With determined steps and burning determination, Leah and Jackson left that place, leaving behind not only the remnants of discrimination, but also a flame of hope, a testament to the power of courage and relentless perseverance in the journey to seek justice for themselves and for those whose voices are not heard. Things, from here, could never go back to the way they were. A poignant, quiet but powerful lesson, a clear demonstration of values that seem simple but are easily forgotten in the modern world. The world sometimes still values people not by talent, character, or perseverance, but by the color of their skin, by forced silence, or simply by their presence, which can be overlooked or denied even when they have done everything right. Have you ever thought, how powerful can the silences in life be? A silence is not a defeat, but a preparation for a louder, more resonant voice. And then, just a Rolls-Royce quietly appeared. No need to shout or scream is enough to make the whole world turn around, look back, and reflect on what happened. That car is not just a symbol of power or status, but an echo of justice, of undeniable truth. Have you ever wondered what the power of presence really is? When one person stands up, not for revenge but for justice, can the world continue to ignore? And in the story of Leah and Jackson, does justice begin with a look, a respectful name, a word heard at the right time? No anger, no resentment, just affirmation. The world will no longer judge anyone by mere superficiality or cold denial. So when faced with injustice, how will you choose to make your voice heard? Will you endure in silence, or will you speak up with unwavering determination? This story is not just Leah's story or Jackson's story or Carolyn's story. It is the story of each of us, in our lives filled with challenges and difficult to break stereotypes. And as you listen to this, I want you to pause and think about yourself. Do you have the courage to not just stand still, but to make a difference? Do you see the power of silence, of a resolute voice, of a powerful presence? Because sometimes there is no need to scream. Just knowing how to stand up properly, knowing when to be silent, and knowing how to use the right strength is enough to make the whole world listen. What do you think about that? Have you ever had, or will you ever have, those moments in your life? Let the story be a reminder to us that justice does not always come with a shout, but sometimes it comes from the calm, steadfastness, and quiet courage within each of us.